Hey there, folks. It's International Podcast Day. Maybe you knew there was such a thing. Maybe you didn't know there was such a thing. But it is. It's International Podcast Day. And here we are today to wait for the music to die down before we get really into it. But hey, we're here to celebrate podcasting and podcasters like you and me and all those friends of ours out there. It's about celebrating what you're building and a few things that could literally save or even make you thousands and thousands of dollars. So, welcome. I'm Gordon Firemark. Some people, in some circles, I'm known as the podcast lawyer, and I am, let's just say I'm bullish on podcasting. I've been a podcaster myself since 2009 when I launched Entertainment Law Update, which is still going strong. What is it now? 16 years later in 2025, we do a monthly legal roundup of cases and news items in the entertainment law space. And more recently, I am the host of Legit Podcast Pro, which is a weekly short form tip, or I won't say short form, it's a brief form tip or strategy or a bit of legal advice or discussion on one or another subject related to the podcasting industry and how to protect oneself and those kinds of things. I like to say that I am here and my mission is to help creators to protect their assets and cover their assets and basically achieve the kind of influence and impact and income that they deserve. And I do that by offering lots of advice and input and information, free education, all those kinds of things to inform, because knowledge is power. And I want to help folks. But then also I offer, of course, as a lawyer, I do done-for-you legal services for creators in all aspects of the entertainment industry, really. Especially I especially love working with creators, podcasters, YouTubers, influencers, and filmmakers, theater makers, that kind of thing as well. And then of course we also have online courses available for entrepreneurs and podcasters. Easy Legal Brands is the name of the company, and it's Easy Legal for podcasters or Easy Legal for entrepreneurs. We also have forms and templates available. Easy Legal Forms and Templates. EasyLegalTemplates.com is the domain for that. Or you can go to Podcast Law Forums if you need something specific for your podcasting adventure. So if you're watching live, I'd love it if you would drop a note in the chat, or if you'd like to join the call, I actually have a Zoom link set up. I'm going to put it here in the chat. You can visit the Zoom. If you're wearing headphones, it makes it easier for us to not have echoes and things like that. And if you have a question for me, I'm going to do lots of Q&A today. But again, just let me start off by saying Happy International Podcast Day. It's about celebrating what we creators are building and giving everybody some information that could save or make them thousands. So we're going to cover a few things on the show today. We're going to talk about some legal myths that might cost you some serious money. We're going to talk about the fastest way you can protect your podcast, especially the name and the brand. And I'm going to talk about a little bit about landing brand deals, and even with a small show, the things that you can do to get a brand deal in place and not step on those legal landmines that find yourself in hot water. So this is our day as creators, your day as a podcaster. Podcasting is one of the most powerful tools that we have at our disposal right now. And I submit that right now it's the most important time for people to use their voices. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on the First Amendment and the threats and things like that, but let's just suffice it to say that freedom of speech is like a muscle. If we don't exercise it, it will atrophy. It will fade into the background. It'll be something that we remember fondly as something we had when we were young. So let's exercise those muscles. Let's exercise our free speech. Say what's on our mind and get the word out about our thoughts, our messages, whatever side of the political spectrum you might be on. Speaking up and speaking out is important, because that's how we have a robust dialogue, a robust social conversation about the things that are important in society and in the world, and even in just our hobbies and things. So that's why I love podcasting so much, is that it's as level a playing field as there's ever been for folks who have something to say. and want to get it out there. Now, finding an audience is another game, and that's something that we spend a lot of time as podcasters pursuing and thinking about. And I'd love to hear it if you've got tips on that or anything really. Jump in and share. But once again, the link for the Zoom is in the comments, and I'd love it if you would like to join in or just ask a question. Even if you're not asking a question, though, I would love to know, who are you? Drop a note in the chat just to tell me who you are, where you're watching from, what your show is, or if you're planning to start a show, what it is, what's the niche, and what are your big goals for the next 12 to 15 months. We're coming up on, it's hard to believe it's Q4 almost. Starting tomorrow is the fourth quarter of 2025, and 2026 is just around the corner. So what are you going to do with your voice in 2026? So the Q&A is in the text, in the chats, I should say, or you can jump on the Zoom link with us, and I'll bring you onto the call if you'd like. This is about education, not legal advice. I am a lawyer. I am an entertainment and podcast specific entertainment lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer unless you've actually reached out and hired me as your lawyer. So all of the information that you're getting here is just that. It's information. Hopefully it helps you make some decisions about things. But if you do need specific guidance, then please reach out, call me up, we'll set up an appointment, or talk to your own lawyer and get the advice and input you need. It's important for legal stuff that all of the facts are brought out, that there's a proper investigation of both the facts and the law before you make any decisions about things. So there's that. So let's talk right now. If you're here, I'd love it if you'd say something and say hello, but let's talk about a quick win for you. Well, let's just jump right off and get started talking about why using a brand or a name doesn't automatically mean that you own it. You don't automatically own the title of your show or the title of your YouTube channel just because you've used it. Now, if you are the first to use it, then basically you do get to claim ownership of it. But there are things that we need to do really to be protective and proactive about those things. So first off, it starts with, what's the brand that you're choosing? Choosing a brand is something that should be considered thoughtfully and carefully. It is something that you don't want to just be totally descriptive. The business podcast or basket weaving 101 or something like that is not going to be distinctive, and it's not going to really capture the mind of the consuming public, right? We need to have something that is distinctive, not descriptive, in order to be entitled to claim ownership of a brand. After all, if you are basket weaving, the basket weaving show, there's no reason that 10 other creators couldn't come up with their own version of the basket weaving show and maybe even call it the basket weaving show or basket weaving or let's talk basket weaving, things like that, right? So there's lots of genericness in that sort of descriptive phrase. And so there's this spectrum that we talk about, from the most distinctive, coined phrases, words that don't exist outside of your brand, outside of your marketing. All the way at one end of the spectrum is coined, and then we have fanciful marks, fanciful names that are, evocative of something, but they're not right on the nose descriptive. There are obviously, distinctive marks that are suggestive, but still not purely descriptive. Then we cross the threshold into the descriptiveness, away from the distinctive side, which is where trademark protection lives, and into the descriptive. And it can be geographically descriptive, like calling a store, West Coast Motorcycles or Los Angeles Donuts or something like that, right? That's not very distinctive at all. It's descriptive geographically. It could also be just purely descriptive, the donut shop or something like that. And it could even be misdescriptive. You could call your, one that I'm thinking of is European Wax Spa, right? Well, if you're in, Nebraska and you go to European Wax Spa, you're not getting you're getting a European style wax, but it's not in Europe. So it's technically geographically misdescriptive, and it tells you exactly what you're getting. So it's misdescriptive and descriptive at once. Then we get all the way over at the other end of the spectrum. So way over here, we've got the coined and fanciful and suggestive and distinctive brands, and then we get into the descriptive ones, and then we get into the generic. Right, a generic phrase or word is just that. It's generic. It's what is used to convey the meaning. And we don't want to take those kinds of things or the descriptive phrases out of the lexicon by granting any one person or company the right to use those things exclusively. So that's the threshold for protecting a trademark or a brand, is that it has to be somewhat distinctive in order to capture the mind of the public. So when you're picking your brand, think about that. Think about something that's sort of distinctive, unique, not descriptive, right? And then do some searching. It's not that hard. You can go to Google, you can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you can go on YouTube, and you can go on the USPTO, that's the United States Patent and Trademark Office website, and you can search there as well, just to do what we call a knockout search. Obviously, if you find others, someone's already registered that as a trademark, or tried to register it as a trademark, that can really inform your thinking about the name you've chosen. But also, if you find that there are 2 or 3 others on the podcast directories, then maybe you want to think about doing something to stand out a little bit, right? It's that old line from Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam, where he says, hey, you got a clash. And there's something to be said for making that impression in the marketplace that's different and stands apart and sets you and your business or entity apart from things. Once you've done that knockout search and determined that there isn't anything at that surface level that's going to be a problem, maybe running a more comprehensive search makes sense. If you're going to register a trademark, it certainly makes sense to do a comprehensive search, because it will be less expensive than running just applying for the trademark and then finding out from there that there's something, because the trademark office runs the search. So that's the keys. Now, the other thing we have to remember, even if you do that knockout search and you find others that are using similar or identical names, is that they may be in different classes of goods and services, and trademarks are broken down into classes. So, medical equipment and chewing gum are not going to fall in the same class. So calling a machine, the Big Red machine in the medical device community probably doesn't interfere with the chewing gum brand Big Red, right? Same is true with podcasts and, shoes and t-shirts and things, unless you're planning on selling merch under the brand as well, right? So we have to think about, what classes do I want to put my brand in? For podcasts, there are 2 relevant ones for the media component, right? There's the stream, the audio, the entertainment service, right? Audio and or video falls in class 41 when it is streamed, and it's just the presentation, it's the presentation, the entertainment or educational or informational service, right? Class 41 is also the class where things like websites land and other things. Then also, because a podcast in audio form at least is downloadable as well, that is also in class 9, which covers certain kinds of electronic appliances, devices, electronic things like files, so that could be a thing. If you are publishing printed material, books, magazines, things like that, that falls in class 25. And if you're doing, that falls in class 16. And if you're doing t-shirts or ball caps, that's going to be in class 25, I believe it is. So we have lots of different classes, and registering in each class is essentially like a separate registration with filing fees and legal fees and those kinds of things. So you want to do a little triage on this and focus on the ones where you are actually occupying the marketplace, because another component of trademark protection is it has to be in use in commerce. So you can't really register a brand until you've started using it. You can sometimes file on what's called an intent to use basis, which gets the approval going and all that, and then gives you a window of time, usually 6 months, to get it up and running and out into commerce. That can be renewed from time to time, and that works. So if you're thinking about launching under a particular title and you want to lock it in, intent to use is a good idea. But it won't be officially fully registered until you've published episodes out there in commerce. So we've picked something unique and not descriptive. We've done that knockout search. We've maybe done that more comprehensive search. We've decided what classes and goods and services we're going to be in. It's a good idea at this point also to lock down the domain names. Certainly you want the .com domain if you can get it. For podcast.fm works. If it's YouTube, it could be .tv. That's another good one. Your social handles, you want to lock those down. Lock down the YouTube channel also if you're doing an audio show. Those are great things to do. And then before you get too far down the path, there's expense associated with registering trademarks, right? So it's important to do the cost benefit analysis. But I would say the decision of when to register your trademark is as soon as you're sure that you're going to make a business out of this, as soon as you're sure that there's a there, then it makes sense to start thinking about registering your trademarks. And certainly if you get to a point, before you get to a point where it would hurt if a competitor came into the marketplace with the same or very similar brand and caused confusion, caused audiences to maybe think that your two shows are affiliated and theirs is not good, and yours is good, then you don't want to be tarred with that brush, essentially, or smeared by their bad reputation. So those are the kinds of things that trademark is here to protect against, that kind of unfair competition by using a confusingly similar name, title, channel name, those kinds of things. So that's the point where you've got to decide, okay, it's time to do something about it and protect that brand. Now, I want to share a quick horror story here. And it's a common story I tell often about a creator, a podcaster, who had a very distinctive title for his show and didn't bother to worry about registering the trademark, didn't heed my advice early, let's put it that way. But eventually he's a friend. He called me up and he said, hey, I want to protect this brand. And listen, it looks like there's somebody else coming into the market with a similar name that uses a similar buzzword in the title and so on. So we rushed down and registered the trademark for his rush down. It's all done online nowadays, but I still metaphorically think of running down to the office, right? We rushed to the trademark registration, put his in, but unfortunately, by the time we did that, this other outfit had already filed their application for a trademark on the basis of an intent to use. So they weren't actually using it in commerce. He's been at it for 13 or 14 years, lots of episodes out in the world and so on, using this title with this distinctive phrase, and they beat him to it because they filed this intent to use application even before they'd started their show. So our application was suspended pending the processing on their application, which went through, and we decided not to oppose the application because we were talking to them, and ultimately it went through. The registration happened, and then the approval, I should say, happened, and they never launched the show, but they kept extending the option to do that for, it turned out to be a total of about 4 years of waiting before they finally ran out of extensions and were deemed to have abandoned their application. At which point my clients sailed through and it's all registered and good now. But all of that time and energy also translates into money when you're paying lawyers and trying to lock your brand in. And all of that expense really could have been spared. So unfortunately, when somebody else files first, it can hold things up even if you were first one into the marketplace, and it can cost you a pretty penny to file an opposition or to petition for cancellation of the trademark on the grounds that you were there first, those kinds of things. So look, this doesn't have to be expensive if you plan early, if you register early. It's only expensive when you wait and then these other kinds of glitches or problems arise. So consider registering your trademarks. And if you'd like to get a little more information about trademarks, you can follow a link to podcasttrademark.com. Let me see. Whoops, that's not what I have to turn the music off. And Cheryl is in the green room, and we'll bring you on in just a second, Cheryl. So go ahead and get your mic and your camera ready, and we can do it. If you don't want to go on camera, we'll do it without it. But anyway, what I was trying to do was type podcast trademark in the chat. So All right, so Podcast Trademark will get you my free guide for podcasters on registering trademarks, and it'll give you some information about what's involved and a lot of what we've just been talking about. So I'm going to bring Cheryl into the call now. If I can remember how to do that, I think I have to designate her as guest 1, and then I'm going to come over here, and that's not right. That's not guest 1. Cheryl, I think I've got you in the call, but I'm not getting you in the call. Let me see if I can do it the other way here. There it is. There you are. Not as pretty as I'd hope, but anyway, you've got to unmute your mic. You're still muted. Hi, Cheryl. It's nice to see you.
Appreciate. Hi, happy International Podcast Day.
Likewise. What's going on?
2 of you. Oh, I was just wondering if you could tell us about how the podcast audience has changed over time and how you expect it to change.
Oh, what a great question. I'm not sure I'm the person to answer that, because my audience hasn't changed that dramatically. It's the same largely the same folks. But one thing I'll say is the podcast audience has gotten a lot larger over time. I would say, I think the statistics are showing that something like 87% of folks who answer these polls say that they have indeed consumed podcasts, and a large chunk of them do regularly. Obviously, when I was starting out as a podcaster 16 years ago now, whatever it is, that wasn't the case. It was a small fraction of society. So podcasting has gone mainstream, I guess you could say. And there are certainly those big entertainer-based shows that have done a lot to drive that. And also the shows like Serial was a big turning point in podcasting, because that true crime show really took off and got audiences interested in figuring out how to listen. And that's just gotten so much easier nowadays anyway. So that's one thing about the audience. The other is the diversity of the audience is no longer just geeky white guys with neck beards, right? Forgive those out there forgive the stereotypes. And so that means there's lots of opportunity for lots of different folks and different voices. That's exciting. Is there something specific you were thinking of that I didn't mention?
No, but I always appreciate your insight. I mean, things are changing so much. There's I have noticed just a wider, like you said, a wider variety of people. And I've also noticed a wider variety of people interested in being on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I appreciate the very simple guest contract that you hand out. But I definitely it's hard to keep up with all the changes, and
yes,
especially with AI.
Yeah, well, and I was going to get to AI a little later on in the copes. That's the active speaker thing going on there. That's weird. 2 of me. Let me fix that, Cheryl, before I get too far down this path here. Let's see. Now it's working. Okay, that's better. Anyway, yeah, AI is a whole thing. I've actually just had an interesting couple of conversations today. Oops, it's not working. Let me go back to there. No, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to just go back to me.
I think it'll be okay if I just go back to watching on YouTube.
Okay.
So I'll see you over there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Cheryl.
Okay, bye.
Got to figure out this technology a little better. Anyway, yeah, AI is definitely, it's here to stay. The cat is out of the bag, if you want. We had this big settlement with Anthropic, the Bartz versus Anthropic case that has come down. And the result of that case is that Anthropic's going to pay a bunch of money. They're going to destroy their data set, I'm told. But they've already trained their stuff, and it's going to continue to train on stuff that's out there. And that case was about books in particular some were downloaded and purchased legally, and some were downloaded illegally. And it's all very peculiar. But the fact is the training's been done, and all that body of knowledge is already there. So you can't untrain an AI. unless you just turn it off and start from scratch. And I don't think that's going to happen. So it's here to stay. This week, we're hearing a lot about, I guess it was about a month ago that it actually originated, but this company from, I want to say somewhere in Scandinavia, maybe Sweden, has developed an AI-based actor. And that is going to shake up the entertainment industry. So AI is here, and it's going to shake us up in lots of ways. In the podcasting space, there's one outfit that has been in the media a little bit lately that is generating about 3,000 new podcast episodes per week, all generated by AI. AI writing, AI voices, AI everything. I don't know at what level human intervention triggers the let's have a show about this topic or whatever, but they are selling advertising against AI generated content. And if listeners are out there and consuming this stuff, then the advertisers will be happy, even though it's AI generated. It's cheaper to make. It's probably smoother and better in some ways. So that's troubling. But it is what it is. So I think we all have to think about, how are we going to use AI? How are we going to consume AI generated? Are we going to consume AI generated content? And do we care? Do we care whether something is coming from an AI or coming from a human? I, for one, kind of feel like I like the human touch. I don't feel like humans are going to be completely pushed out of things because of AI. It's going to make it easier. Yeah, humans don't scale the way AI does. That's exactly right. Oh, Aaron, hello. Nice to see you. Love being on podcast. I think it helps getting the word out about many different things, in your case, your latest film. Yeah, absolutely. Guest strategies are, both as a host and as a guest, can be really powerful in attracting more audience to what you're doing. So if you are a guest on shows, it's certainly a great way to put yourself in front of new audiences, folks that are, hopefully have a like mind and are going to be interested in what you're promoting. And if you're a guest, if you're a host, having guests on, they bring their audience. If they mention your show and promote it, you're going to get some more listeners from it. So that's a big plus as well. So thank you for that feedback, Aaron. Wonderful. And folks, if you're watching and haven't had a chance to chime in, I'd love to know who you are, where you're from, what your show is about, what kind of things you do, and if you have goals and or just general observations for the future as well. And questions are obviously very welcome. So thank you. Let me come back to my next topic. Speaking of guesting, thank you for the transition, Aaron. I want to tell you a little story about a podcaster client of mine. This is some years ago now, but she's a journalist, and she created a show in the parenting space. And in one of her early episodes, she interviewed a lactation specialist, a lactation consultant, about the value of breast milk, breastfeeding, and all of the things that go into rearing children. And great. The episode was fantastic. Everybody was happy with it, and so on. This lactation expert was out promoting the episode, all those kinds of things. And then about a year later, the host decided, okay, there's other sides to this story. We'll bring on someone to talk about supplementing or replacing with formula, and did an episode about that. At this point, and I think there might have been a sponsorship relationship with Enfamil, or one of the baby formula companies as well. In any event, this did not sit well with that lactation consultant who had been on the show in episode 9 or something like that, who immediately then demanded, take down my episode, don't even mention my name in your podcast feed, delete it altogether. And, my client, this podcaster, she's a journalist. She has a background in journalistic training and believes in telling multiple sides of the story, give the whole picture, right? Not just a one-sided presentation. And she decided that, okay, that's fine. If you would prefer not to have your episode live, then please write a short memo, just an explanation that I can post on the blog in its place to explain why the episode is no longer here. Share your point of view. The guest did not want to do that. She refused. And in fact, that's when the lawsuit threats began. And talked with my client about things, and we, concluded that we believed we had a right to keep the episode up and all of that. So Anyway, in any event, didn't act fast enough one way or the other, and sure enough, the lactation consultant filed a lawsuit asking for quite a lot of money, disproportionate, if you ask me, but nevertheless, it was a big, big lawsuit, which meant big, big lawyers and big, big bills for this podcaster who, still had a relatively small show. So ultimately, we had to get her into litigation posture and hire a lawyer in the other state where the case had been filed. And this is one of those situations where everybody fights it out and nobody walks away with any kind of sense of achievement or happiness. And ultimately, the episode was taken down, and the replacement explanation was there that didn't mention the lactation consultant's name. But the takeaway, the lesson from that is to use a guest release. Had this host used a document, a contract with the guest, short contract that just says, you have my consent to record, you have my consent to publish, it's irrevocable, I can't require you to take it down, those kinds of things, then that would have been sufficient to prevent that lawsuit. So the value of the guest release is, of course, getting that consent, getting that irrevocability on paper and into an agreement. People remember signing things better than they remember conversations. Plus, you can always hold it in front of them and show them. It also can amount to a waiver of certain other rights. You can't claim defamation just because they don't like the edit of the show, for example. And it's a good idea in these releases to clarify the boundaries for when it's okay to use AI. Back to what we were talking about, Cheryl, AI tools are out there now that make editing much easier, that make filling in a missing word pretty easy, and that can really make the workflow much easier. But I do think you have to tell and get the consent of your guests that you're going to use these tools. And I think what's wise is to, promise that you're not going to use it in a way that manipulates the meaning of the words said or changes the tone of their voice in a dramatic way. We've always done audio engineering and sweetening that lowers the shrill highs and evens out the rough spots and raises the quiet levels and those kinds of things. The AIs just do it faster and more efficiently. And but I think we need to tell them that that's what we're going to do and get their consent so they can't claim that you've changed the meaning or manipulated things. Another component of a guest release is the agreement that their participation is voluntary and they're not being paid for that, unless they are, of course. And bottom line is that no right to revoke the consent or demand the takedown later on. So that's what I advocate. Use a guest release. And in fact, you can go to podcastrelease.com and get a free guest release that I have created. And just give me your email address and I will share it with you. I'm going to share the link for that in the chat here. All right, so podcastrelease.com is there for you. And, a couple of misconceptions or mistakes that are common in this arena is this idea that, they're showing up to talk and that's enough to show that they consented. And yeah, but what's the scope of the consent? How are you supposed to use this? What can you do? What can't you do? Are you allowed to use AI to edit? Are you allowed to publish it widely? Or is it really just for a very limited purpose? Can you transcribe it and turn it into a book or at least a chapter in a book? Those kinds of things. Assuming that platform terms will cover you is a bad idea. Assuming that a DM is as good as a contract. It's almost there, but it's not quite. Worst case scenario, if you don't want to have people sign a piece of paper, and I think the formality of a piece of paper is actually a good thing. A lot of folks feel like they're going to alienate their guests. And I have heard of some guests who kind of don't like the idea of signing a guest release. But honestly, mostly it's because they misunderstand what it's about and what it's for. Because they think they're giving up their ownership of their intellectual property. That's not the case. What they're giving up is the ownership of the episode that is created by the creator, the host. But we're not expecting them to give up ownership of other things that they've already created, right? So I think that formality is good. Another mistake that a lot of creators make is to wait until after the recording is done, before or after they're ready to publish. Before they ask, and that's not great either. So If you don't currently use a release, you might feel like, well, I was a common thing I hear is I was in radio for 30 years and we never got a release from anybody who came on the radio. And, I didn't even get a release from Cheryl when she came on here. And, this is going to be an ephemeral thing. It's not going to last long. Same with radio. Someone goes on the radio show, talks on the morning radio show. It's not out there for the whole world forever and ever. Nowadays, yes, it could also be released as a podcast, but most radio is still that ephemeral media, which doesn't last. It isn't there forever. Podcasting is different because that audio file will sit somewhere on a server for a good long time, maybe even forever. And that perpetual nature of it is what's different. So this is not radio, and other areas of the law show that as well. You can't use music in a podcast the way you can in a radio show because the structure of the licensing is different. So bottom line, different medium, different rules. That's where I come from on this. So if you don't currently use a guest release, I urge you to have a look at the one I've made available for you. It was updated about a year ago to accommodate use of AI a little bit for editing and without changing meaning. And it's customizable, so you can take it and use it as you like. What I recommend with guest releases is to incorporate the release into the booking process. Make it a part of that so that it's can't be overlooked, right? Don't send them a hard copy thing that they've got to sign and print and scan and email or fax back to you, those kinds of things. Build it into the calendar booking, right? Most of us are using things like Calendly or Acuity scheduling or whatever. It is possible to just build a form that requires them to check a box. Yes, I've read and agreed to the above. And then they type their name or something as a signature and you have the consent. So that is good. That's better than that DM. And in a worst case scenario, if somebody doesn't want to sign something, you don't want to bother with that, then have a script that you read at the beginning of the recording session asking, do you understand that you are being recorded and I will be publishing this episode and I have the right to use the content we create together exclusively in any form I like forever and ever and ever. And without revocability. I actually provide the script as well with the podcast release download that you can get here. So I recommend at least getting an oral consent, but it's better if it's in writing. So on to a new subject. I should have done this on the last one, but I forgot. All right, next subject, monetization. Let's talk about brand deals in particular. So if you're watching and you've done a brand deal, I would love it if you drop a note in the comments. If you haven't and you're wondering, if you have questions about brand deals, hit me. Drop it in the comments or jump on the Zoom. I'll publish the Zoom link again. We'll try that again going forward. But a brand deal is really just any kind of a relationship between a host or an influencer or a YouTuber or really anybody with a brand that the brand essentially pays you for sharing a message, sharing something. Maybe it's an influencer deal where you wear their clothing or you use their product on camera. Those kinds of things are all variations on brand deals. What many of the structures of those can vary quite widely. Sometimes it's a flat fee on a per episode basis or a per campaign basis. That's great because it's simple, it's predictable, you know what to expect. And that's great. Sometimes it's based, though, on performance, where you're measuring CPAs or CPMs, or it could be affiliate commissions that are paid when the buyer of the product uses your particular coupon code or visits a particular link before buying, something like that. That's a little riskier, but it scales really well. If you've got a big audience, you can really get some nice revenue going from those kinds of things. And then there are hybrids as well, where there's a smaller upfront flat fee, but also some kind of a performance bonus. Typically, if it achieves a certain threshold, there will be a bonus payment, or it could just be performance based over a certain dollar amount in revenue. Then we'll share on this percentage or something like that. The thing is, with these deals, a handshake isn't going to be a great idea. Unfortunately, a lot of them are done on a handshake or just a short form deal memo kind of a thing. So you want to make sure that there's some clarity in the contract. And the clarity on that needs to be, first of all, what are the deliverables? How many episodes are we doing? How many host reads? How many social posts are we doing? Whatever the deliverables are, that needs to be clearly articulated in the contract. And as the creator, if you can't make it happen for some reason, then you want in the contract also a provision that says you're going to make it good. That if you promise 10 mentions over the next 12 episodes and you get to the end of the 12 and you realize you only did 8, well, you're going to do 2 more as a freebie, just to make sure that that they've gotten what they were supposed to get, even though it goes beyond the term or something like that. What are the usage rights? Is the brand allowed to reuse the content that you're making? And if so, for how long? How many times? Those kinds of things. And honestly, it shouldn't be a lot. It should be, you create it, you use it, they get to use it once or twice or whatever, and then if they want to reuse it, if it becomes an ongoing campaign, then there should be more payments coming for each additional month or quarter or campaign or whatever. Exclusivity. Is the creator blocked from working with competitors of the brand? And if so, for how long? I'm not saying don't agree to exclusivity, but it should be very limited. Duration of the campaign, or maybe a few months after the campaign is over, just so that, again, we're not having that confusion. If you're doing a brand deal for a cosmetics product, for example, and you're working with brand A, they don't want you immediately switching over to brand B right after the campaign is over, because that's going to be jarring to audiences, and it sort of depletes the value of the brand deal in the first place. This is an area where, money talks, right? The length of that exclusivity and post-term exclusivity is, directly proportional to the compensation involved in buying that exclusivity. So, excuse me. So, what else? I talked about make goods. What happens if you, for some reason, can't deliver on one of the deliverables? You've got to make it up, right? That's better than losing money, paying money out as a damages kind of a thing. And the timing of the payment in brand deals, advertising deals, this is always a kind of a hot issue. Don't accept the we'll pay you when the sponsor pays us from an agency or something like that. You need a firm timeline. It doesn't have to be payment up front, but you should know that I'm going to get paid within 30 days. I'm going to get paid within 60 days. Some brands will try to make that 120 or even 180 days. You shouldn't be waiting 6 months to get paid for something you did back in January or whatever. So you want to be really, really thoughtful about insisting on a binding timeline for payment. And if the agencies don't want to do anything other than we pay when we get paid, well, maybe think about working with different agencies. And I've seen scenarios where creators, and in this case podcasters, have done host-read ads for 6, 8, 10 months at a stretch without ever getting paid. And then a year later, more than a year later, they're still waiting for payment because for whatever reason, the sponsor didn't pay the agency, the ad booking outfit. And unfortunately, the terms of the contract were we pay when we get paid. Well, they may not have much incentive to collect on unpaid bills if they've got sort of bigger fish to fry and more going on. Or the agency might actually not be around anymore if they're dealing with a lot of these, right? So you want to make sure that you are being compensated appropriately, fairly, and in a timely fashion in these deals. So use written contracts. A couple of red flags to bring out about brand deals. Success metrics. What does that mean? If they're vague or open to multiple interpretations, that can really be a problem. So you'll really need to kind of pin those things down. Another phrase to be really wary of is in perpetuity. It means forever. If you're granting someone rights to reuse your content in perpetuity without any additional compensation for each time it's reused or something, that's going to come back and hurt you later on. It's going to feel worse and worse as time goes by. Another red flag is when they are offering you the exposure. Oh, really? You're going to get me the exposure. So I'm going to make content for you that features your brand on my content, presenting it to my audience, and you're going to also share that content with your audience, and that's somehow supposed to benefit me. No. Exposure doesn't put a roof on the house, and it doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't put shoes on your kids' feet. So exposure bucks don't really count for much. It's, it's not even crypto. It's funny money, right? Exposure bucks, right? So be really thoughtful about that. So anybody out there had a brand deal and been down this road or had any experience with these kinds of things? I'd love to know. And if you're new and you're just joining in, I'd love it if you would just drop your name and tell me a little bit about what you do, what your brand, what your niche is, if you're a podcaster or a creator, and where you're watching from. I'd love to engage with you a little bit. And if you have had a brand approach you with a deal that just didn't fit right, I'd love to hear about that as well. Not going to name names or call out the bad apples, but it'd be nice to hear from folks who've been down this path. I certainly hear from them every week, but I'm not at liberty to share a lot of details from my client interactions. So, all right. Well, nobody's coming in with those right now, so I'm going to move on to another little bit of segment that I want to talk about. This is a discussion of things in sponsorship agreements that we need to be on the wary of, on the lookout for. First off, a term sheet that includes fuzzy or vague language, whether it's about the payment timing or the exclusivity or the reuse, all those kinds of things. That's a real problem, a real deal breaker in my book. If it's fuzzy, if it's ambiguous, we need to get it clarified. It is not okay just to sort of sit back and oh, well, we'll figure it out later, because inevitably you think of it one way, they think of it another way. And a year later, 5 years later, everybody's doesn't recall all of the nature of the conversation. So getting things in writing and in precise writing is very, very important. What else? Fuzzy language is bad. Tightening up the deliverables, right? Specific numbers, specific dates and times when things are due, being specific about to whom they are to be delivered is really important. If somebody changes jobs and the person you're delivering to is no longer there, then you need to be able to figure out who's next. So maybe it's a job title rather than a named person, or maybe it's the CEO is the fallback. You can always deliver to the CEO, right? Something like that. Exclusivity clauses, again, they can and should be limited, not just in the length of time, but also exclusive in what marketplace, in what arena, right? If you're doing a cosmetics brand deal or a sponsorship with a cosmetics company, the exclusivity should be limited to their direct competition, brands that compete for the same market and audience and customer base. It shouldn't be you're only going to advertise for us and you're never going to advertise for Coca-Cola or Casper Mattress or Amazon or whatever, right? You don't want to be that limited, because that cuts off your earning opportunities. So be thoughtful about that, as well as the timeline. And sometimes you can even tie it to if they begin doing business with another influencer or another podcast that is in your competitive space, that you are then free to break the exclusivity, something like that. What else? I was going to share a one sheet that I never got time to make today. So anyway, let's move on. I would love to open up to Q&A again. So if you are here and watching and you have a question for me, hit me in the chat or join the Zoom call, and we'll get some question and answer going. If anybody has anything to ask. I see some people giving thumbs up and hearts, and I appreciate it. I would love it if you wanted to engage with me a little bit. Let me know what's on your mind. What are you wondering about? Going to also be talking about some big mistakes that folks make in their legal journey as they become creators or build out their creator-driven businesses. So I guess we'll do that next. Let me give another quick transition so I can see where I'm editing it later. Okay. Some 10K mistakes. This is sort of a little lightning round. I'm going to give some myths here, right, in rapid fire. And if you have a comment, or if you've fallen victim of these myths, or if you think I'm wrong, pop something in the chat and let me know. First off, I'll form an LLC later when I get big enough. Okay, I get it. LLC formation, depending on where you're based, could be more expensive, and you do need to do a cost-benefit analysis, sure. But waiting on these things does leave your personal assets at risk. One of the important reasons to form a company, an LLC or a corporation, is it protects your assets. If you own a home, if you own a bank account, if you own a retirement fund, and you are sued and you don't have an LLC associated with your show, if someone sues because of something you said or did with your podcast, or they relied on something you said and hurt themselves, they can come right after all of your personal assets. If you have an LLC or a corporation, it acts as a barrier against that. If you have done things right, if you have followed the rules and kept things separate, that separateness is important, and it can act as a shield. Bob, thank you for the question. And first of all, hello, my friend. But can you open an LLC in a different state other than where you reside? Yes, you can. It's very common to do that. I generally don't recommend it for small businesses because the additional cost and the additional hassle factor is significant. And if you are actually doing business in the state where you reside, that becomes either your nerve center or your muscle center of your business. Then you are supposed to register it in the home state as well, and it's registering it as what we call a foreign corporation or a foreign LLC. Excuse me while I cough some more. Okay. Yes, so you can form an LLC in another state, and it's actually common, especially if you have investors in that other state or other, if you have significant operations in that other state, it is not at all uncommon. Aaron mentions he has an LLC for his movie, and yeah, that is something that we do that's a little different because we're going to use the LLC, I believe, as the fundraising financing entity, right? So we're going to sell off ownership equity shares of that LLC, membership interests in that LLC, as a way of raising the financing to make the movie. And then all of those collective members of the LLC will receive their share of the net income from the film over time. And that's how the investors see a return on investment. So it's a great idea. And in the film business, we call that a single purpose entity. So each film a person or a company makes would have its own entity, its own business entity set up for that purpose, so that we're not intermingling the monies and the investors and all of those kinds of things. And yeah, so that's a valuable thing. We also do that in the legit theater business, where each production of a play even is its own entity. So we don't have that cross mingling, what we call cross collateralization, where the losses from one are offset by the income from another. That may or may not be fair to the investors. So you use separate entities to sort of keep them as discrete projects. Bob says, if a big project happens only once per year, are LLCs a yearly purchase? Good question. Thank you. So an LLC it's an ongoing business operation that the government expects you to pay upkeep. You have to file statements every year. You have to pay taxes on the earnings of the LLC, or at least file taxes. And yes, most states have an annual renewal fee just to stay in good standing. Different states, different amounts. Some states it's very inexpensive. Here in California, it's actually quite expensive because there's a minimum tax payment to the state of California. The upkeep is easy. It's $25 fee to file a statement, and you're good to go. But you have to pay taxes. And some states have minimum taxes. Here in California, $800. So not always the path to go down. And if you have a specific scenario in mind, forming in another state might be a viable approach. It's just something we should talk about. And Bob, you know how to find me, so reach out. And we can talk about that. Another lightning round, and it's not such a lightning round, right? Answering questions. Fair use will cover my clip. If I'm using a clip in my show, either as part of my intro or just talking about a movie I saw or something I heard, not always. It's not fair use is not that simple. I'm going to go back to Bob. Delaware. That's a misconception. Bob says, I've heard of people going to Delaware where it's cheap. Delaware is not cheap. Delaware, the initial filing is not expensive. It's like $100 or something like that. But in Delaware, interestingly, the way they tax LLCs, it depends on the size of the LLC. So yes, a one-person LLC could be relatively inexpensive. Delaware is a popular place for corporations in particular, and larger LLCs are going to have lots of shareholders because it's very management friendly. So if you're taking on a lot of shareholders and you want to be taxed and administered under Delaware law, not because it's cheaper, but because it's more effective at giving the board of directors more power, giving the owners essentially less power against the board of directors. But if you're not getting into big financial structures and things like that, I think going into Delaware, you're still going to have to file in your home state. And so you're going to end up paying those same amounts and taxes and things there too, if you plan to avail yourself of the benefits of being in your home state at all. So, it is, yes, a lot of folks do it. And I think it's misguided. I've actually helped clients undo their Delaware LLCs because the annual taxation was getting out of control, just based on the number of shares that were issued. Even though they were worth a penny each, Delaware had a fixed dollar amount per share that they were doing or something like that. It was pretty crazy. So be thoughtful and careful and make sure you investigate before you conclude that a Delaware LLC is the right way to go. All right, so back to fair use. Fair use is this First Amendment free speech based defense in copyright infringement cases, and it involves the looking at four independent, four factors, all of which combine to help us determine whether there's a fair use. The four factors are the nature of the alleged infringing work. Is it commercial or is it artistic? It's not whether you're making money, but is it a commercial venture? Do you have ads, or are you promoting a product or a service, or is it educational, artistic, purely artistic? Podcasting could go either way, so we got to be thoughtful about that. But it's not, none of these factors decide it for you, right? It's one of four. The next factor is the nature of the original. If you're taking a clip from another podcast, it may or may not be the same nature of the original. It probably is. There's currently a case going on involving, actually, he's the guy who kind of laid the groundwork for the idea that reaction videos on YouTube are fair use. But he is now suing several other creators who have reacted to his videos. But the way they did it was not really, he calls it lazy reaction. And I think he's likely to win that case against them if it goes that far. Because the nature of the two bodies of content are basically the same. The amount and substantiality, that's the third factor of what was taken in those cases, was large. If it's a clip, yes, it's a shorter clip. It's less substantial for sure. But if it's the core essence of the original work, then it may still be considered substantial, even though it's not quantitatively large. Okay. And then the fourth factor is the impact impact on the market for or value of the original. And it depends. Is there a licensing mechanism for the clip that you used? Film companies and music companies, they do license their content. So it is something you would be taking money out of their pockets by using it without getting a license. And so that's a harm to their market or value. And so we have to balance all of those factors. And unfortunately, there is no rule of thumb on this. The closest thing we have to a rule of thumb has been the reaction video being fair use. But even that is now in question because there are abuses of those things. So don't assume that a fair use will cover your use of a clip. Either figure it out and do the analysis, or hire a lawyer to figure out the analysis, or probably the cheaper way is to go ask for permission and get it in writing. Number 3, handshake deals with your co-host. That should do the job. Nope. Sorry. Friendships, partnerships, they go sour, right? Ownership disputes get ugly fast in this space. And I'll tell you that there's the only thing worse than a podcast divorce is a marriage divorce. I have seen over and over and over again creator partnerships that have broken up over, I wouldn't call them simple, silly things, but over things that could have been addressed if there had been a written agreement that dealt with what's this relationship going to look like. This is what I call a podcast prenup. And if you go to podcastprenup.com, you can get a podcast planning guide, a prenup planning guide that will help you ask the right questions and have the conversations about, hey, who's going to own this thing? Who's going to share what? How much are we? What's going to happen if somebody needs to leave? How do we facilitate an exit? Those kinds of questions, and what are our percentages, and all those kinds of things can be really efficiently handled in a document that's better done at the beginning rather than trying to fix it at the end of a relationship. Another big mistake is the idea that small shows don't get sued. Well, lawsuits aren't always about money. They're not always about size. They're about principles, and they're about leverage. So regardless of how much reach your show has, you need to be on the lookout because, people do sue over a principle. They do sue because they didn't like the fact that the formula person was talking on a show where they had previously talked about the lactation industry. Even though it was a small show, that was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in the making that had to be settled. Small shows do get sued. We often just don't hear about them. Another thing that happens when small shows get sued is that they disappear. The show just gives up. They go away. And, making the point sort of moot sometimes. What else? Another mistake or misconception is that networks will pay when brands pay. That is back to what I was talking about earlier, is the ad deal that says we'll pay you when we get paid. That is a common approach, but it's not the right approach. You should push back on this. Networks should pay you when you deliver whatever it is you're supposed to deliver. You're doing an ad read in your podcast episode. You should get paid within a fixed amount of time after that ad read goes live, gets published, right? And even then, maybe even after you do the read, if the episode for some reason doesn't get published and you're not at fault for that, you should still get paid. You did the job. You did the work. Let the network be responsible, or the ad agency be responsible for dealing with the advertiser who's unhappy or whatever. But you don't wait until they get paid to get paid. That is just another myth here that I think we need to dispel. So, all right, next segment here, we'll talk about it again. If you've got something you'd like to share, put it in the chat and let me know. And I do love the hearts and thumbs up, but I love engagement even more. So please let me know who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, what your show's about, your niche, those kinds of things. Love to hear about who's watching and who's listening. Okay. All right. Here is now this next segment. I just want to share a little sort of a 7-day legal sprint that you can use, a roadmap that you could take in the course of a week to get a lot of the legal stuff done quickly, easily, and affordably. First off, day one, look up that show name. Do that search, that knockout search I was talking about. Get on Google, get on Amazon, get on all the podcast directories and search to make sure that the name that you want to use is available, the name you are using is available, and that there aren't a bunch of others out there. And then search the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. That's uspto.gov. You can go on there and find the link for trademark search and type in your name and see what else is out there. Looking for things that are matching or close to matching in Class 9 and Class 41. Those are the ones to watch for. Also look out for the ones that have been abandoned or canceled or, abandoned or canceled, because those will maybe give you some insight into whether or not it's even going to be protectable. You can follow the documents links and investigate. Were there office actions? Was there a refusal to register? Those kinds of things. That can be helpful as well. Okay, number 2, day 2, start using a guest release. Download the guest release, podcastrelease.com, and have it ready to go. Build it into your calendar scheduling thing, whatever, or just have it ready to go with your guests. Number 3, do an inventory of the intellectual property that you already have in place. Your intellectual property includes things like the logo, if you've had custom written theme music, if you've got episodes already in the can, if you've got artwork, if you've got a website. You need to keep an inventory of all this thing. Date created, by whom, and where is it found? All of that stuff is good to have as an asset list. Next up, consider forming that LLC. On day 4, set up a business bank account. Start keeping things separate, right? Have the LLC, keep the LLC separate. podcast is under the LLC. If you didn't start the LLC when you started the show, you're going to need to transfer all of those IP assets that we were talking about into the LLC. That's a relatively short form document. You're going to want to run it by someone like me, a lawyer, and probably an accountant, just to make sure you don't end up taking a tax hit for selling valuable assets and acquiring valuable assets by the LLC and things like that. But there are strategies to avoid that, so just be thoughtful about that. But get that company and bank account set up. On day 5, co-host contractor agreements, those podcast prenups I was talking about. It's not just your co-host, but anybody who's touching your show should be signed under a written contract that explains who owns it. You're looking for that work made for hire clause that articulates who owns the output of this worker's work, whether it's the co-host, the editor, the producer, the writer, the researcher. They all should be signed up under independent contractor. The co-host should be under a co-host agreement of some sort, and the rest of the folks should be under an independent contractor kind of an agreement. Day 6 is build your sponsorship one sheet. Yeah, you want to have a sheet that explains what your show is, who the audience is, some metrics about the audience size and reach and how many episodes you've got and those kinds of things, and the kinds of brands that you have worked with in the past, as well as the aspirational stuff about the future. Having that one sheet that you can send out as soon as somebody shows interest in backing your show can be really valuable. You don't want to miss out on opportunities when they knock. And on day 7, figure out your disclosure statement. If you're doing affiliate ads, if you're doing endorsements, product unboxings, those kinds of things, you need to know what you have to say, both in the show notes and on screen and in the audio, to properly disclose the nature of those relationships. If you are getting paid for the message that the audience is hearing, they need to be clear that it's a paid message. If you are getting free goods because you're unboxing this product and you're going to show off and gee whiz about it, and you got that piece of equipment or whatever for free, you need to say so. They sent it over for my honest review, and here we go. That's all you have to say. If you don't have to return it when you're done, you need to say that as well. If you paid for it yourself, then it's beneficial to say, I bought this with my own money. I'm going to give you my honest review, and we'll see. Maybe I'll return it, whatever. Likewise for affiliate ads, I'll get paid a small commission if you buy using the link that you find in my show notes. That's a proper disclosure. Just saying, thank you very much. I'll get paid a little bit if you buy from this. Okay. So these are the minimum viable legal setup steps that you should take as you get into the creation business. That's it. So, all right. So we've talked about, gosh, what have we talked about? We've talked about the legal myths that could cost you money. We talked about the ways to protect your podcast and your brand. We've talked about how brand deals work. We've talked about some of the pitfalls and things to watch for. We've taken a few questions. We talked a little bit about AI and how the audience has changed. Thank you, Cheryl. And we've taken a few of your questions. And then we also talked about those mistakes that folks make. And I laid out the 7 steps of the minimum viable legal setup to do in as little as a week, a 7-day sprint. Not too big of a job. I think that's great. So any other questions before we call it a day? I'm going to sign up. Oh, if Bob is a musician, by the way. Bob asked, if I purchase a published arrangement for orchestra, does that allow me to perform it at no further cost? No, it doesn't. It does allow you to use it to rehearse the orchestra and so on. And it does allow you to perform the show. But the venue where you perform will also need to have a license from the performing rights organization that owns or controls that composition. Now, if the composition is classical work that is in the public domain, then you can use it freely. You don't have to do anything. But if it's an arrangement that is still entitled to some protection, because if there's original components of an arrangement, they are in fact entitled to copyright protection, then that arranger's public performing rights organization. And you've heard of these organizations. There's ASCAP, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. There's BMI, Broadcast Music Incorporated. There's CSAC, which is the Society for European something something and composers, CSAC. And there's another one called GMR, Global Music Rights, here in the US. And other countries have other organizations like these. So you need to think about it. In England, it's PRS. In Canada, it's SOCAN. These performing rights organizations are the folks that collect and distribute royalty revenue from public performances of music to the composers and the publishers that own and control that music. Now, some print publishing may include that license, and you need to read the fine print that will say, yes, it's free, it's licensed for free as a result of purchasing it or whatever. Another thing you need to know, Bob, is that when you purchase that published arrangement, if you didn't purchase all of the parts for all of the instruments, if you've got like a master arrangement, making copies of that technically, of the print, is technically an infringement as well. So I believe when you buy a published arrangement, they actually give you all of the different parts that you would need to perform it. But I haven't bought published sheet music in 40 years. 40, yeah, something like 40 years. So I don't know for sure. That's something you'll have to check the packaging and the liner notes or inside cover of the arrangement or whatever you've got. And of course, someone like me, I can help you and interpret what that says if you need to. But ASCAP and BMI and CSAC and GMR, they do need to collect royalties, and that's usually paid by the venues. So, and that's covered usually under venues blanket licenses. So it isn't something to worry about, but just technically speaking, ownership of the sheet music does not necessarily give you the right to perform it in public. So, all right. Any other questions? It's now 13 minutes past 1 o'clock on the West Coast, and I had only planned to be here for an hour. So thank you for your questions and keeping me going. This was fun. It is International Podcast Day, and I'm grateful to those who've shown up, and I'm grateful to those who watch and listen in later iterations. Celebrate podcasting. Listen to your favorite podcast today, and give them a comment. Give them a review in the apps and in the directories. It is valuable and useful. I'm actually going to tell you the names of a couple of my favorite shows, just so that I can give them a little boost. So one of my favorite shows is from a friend and client. His name is Colin Boyd. He has a show called The Expert Edge, in which he talks about strategies for online business and especially running an expert business and public speaking and giving your signature talk. And that's his business there is helping people learn how to create effective communications from the stage and webinars and things like that. Another also in the online business space is the Amy Porterfield Show. Amy is a longtime podcaster and influencer, and she's in the business of teaching folks how to run online businesses. James Wedmore's Mind Your Business podcast brings a spiritual business approach to online business and maximizing yourself and your things in your business. What else do I like to listen to? A couple of comedy shows. I'm not going to name names on that one. Meredith Marsh, and her show is called, I'm blanking on her name, but if you search Meredith Marsh on YouTube, she's a YouTube expert and consultant, and she has a great show as well that is worth its listen. And I tend to listen to the Email Marketing Show. I tend to listen to some of the NPR programming is pretty great as well. And if you like true crime, I commend to you one of my clients. The show is called Sleuth and Surgeon from Crime Sisters Media, and it is a wonderful story worth listening to. Kind of a shocking story of a true crime that happened a few years ago. So, and that's that. I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to sign off. Thank you for being here and watching or listening, and see you again real soon. Thanks for being here.